What's going on, guys? 100.3 Phillies R&B DNA here with the chief officer of the Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment sector. We have Mr. David Gould. How are you doing, sir?
Good, man. Dan, thanks for having me. Appreciate you having me on here.
Man, I appreciate you taking the time for us, man. So for the average person who doesn't know what Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment does, what could you give us give us an elevator pitch of what it's like working for that company?
Yeah. So, a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with HBSC or Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment, but we're essentially the parent company for the 76ers. We also own and operate a few other teams, including or one other team, including the New Jersey Devils. We also operate the Prudential Center, which is up where the Devils play, and then our owners, our managing partners, Josh Harris and David Blitzer. They also have invested in or own a number of other sports properties, which include, an MLS team, an NFL team, actually a Premier League team. And so those aren't actually under the HBSE umbrella, but there are a lot of different organizations and teams that we get to work with. But for me, for the most part, I spend a lot of my time with the Sixers. I work over here in our training facility and also with the Devils.
Okay. So as Chief Diversity and the Impact Officer for HBSE, could you walk us through your day-to-day from like the time you clock in and the time you clock out? Is it ever the same or is everything different?
No, it's different, and there's really no clocking in and clocking out. It's kind of
Okay.
like,
What's an exciting day?
there's always stuff going on. So to back up for a second, my role is really, it was created in 2020. As a lot of us remember, after George Floyd's murder, a lot of different companies and teams like put out statements on social media talking about their commitment to social and racial justice and racial equity. And we did the same thing. But, one thing that I really respect about our managing partners is that they said, we put out this statement, which is fine and great. But we're not going to do anything. We're not going to say anything else until we figure out what we're actually doing about it. Right. Like we want to invest resources and take action. And, but then the question was like, what does that look like? And what does that look like for a sports and entertainment company? And so we kind of went through a process to try to figure out what that was. And what we decided was, at the end of the day, we're not a racial and social justice organization, right? Like we're not the NAACP. We're not the ACLU. We run an NBA team and an NHL team. But there's a lot of things that we do really well. And so what we said is, let's focus on what we do well and think about how we channel that intentionally to have a positive impact on our communities and elevate sort of like the values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial justice and economic opportunity. And so my role was really created within the company to oversee that work. And, my team kind of works as internal consultants across the organization to think about what are the ways in which we can carry out our work that has that positive impact. So a good example is we have this program called Buy Black, which is one of the things I'm most proud of that we've created, where we identify a local Black-owned business in our market, and we make them an official team partner for the year. So like if you go to a Sixers game, for example, you may see us promoting like Toyota or Kia or things like that. And so those are big companies that invest resources to for us to market their business and their brand. The unfortunate reality is there's not a lot of Black-owned businesses who have can cut checks the size of what we're accustomed to have a partnership with an NBA team, right? Like that's something that's really valuable. We've got millions of followers on social media. We have thousands of fans in our building every night. And so we are essentially donating that service and that opportunity to promote business, a business to a local Black-owned business, knowing the disparities that exist between Black-owned businesses and sort of the rest of the business community. We make up over 40% of the population in Philadelphia, but I think like less than 8% of businesses in Philly are Black-owned. So that's like something that we're trying to help out with, trying to help local businesses scale and get access to a larger customer base and more exposure. So there's different things like that we do every day across the company to try to think about what are things that we're already doing, but that we can leverage in a way, that's going to have a positive impact on our communities.
I like what you said at the beginning of your sentiment, saying that we would rather we put out this statement, but we don't want to put out any other statements until we figure out what we're doing. You know, actions
Yeah.
speak louder than words, and you guys are doing a great job. Another thing that another piece of action, we recently had a sports business boot camp. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So we're really fortunate to have some students from MIT and Cheney. For those who aren't aware, Cheney's a HBCU in our area, the first HBCU in the country, which we're proud of. And MIT has a really amazing sports and analytics program up in their university. They're national leaders, and actually through partners of ours, a company called Mosaic Development Partners, which is a local Black-owned developer that we've done a lot of work with. One of our managing partners has actually invested in them to help them scale and grow. They actually brought this idea to us of creating this institute and sort of boot camp where we're bringing students from Cheney and MIT to come together to work on real life problems and challenges that we're having from a business standpoint. And they kind of got to work with our executives, learn from us, but then also apply their lessons to individual projects and then present to us at the end of the week. And so that was really special because we were able to provide students with an opportunity for exposure that they otherwise wouldn't have had. Got access to unmatched resources and sort of expertise in the industry, and got FaceTime in front of like key executives. And so that was really cool. And as we think about another thing that we try to do here at HBSE is how do we diversify the workforce and frankly, like give more opportunity exposure to people who look like you and me into sports. Like I grew up in Philly, I grew up in Germantown, played ball in high school and college, always wanted to make it to the NBA. Never really considered that I could make it to the NBA off the court. You know what I mean? Like for us, we usually see either an announcer, a coach, a GM, or a player. And it didn't even occur to me that there's this whole other side of the business, right? That there's a lot of opportunity. And so as we think about, you really can't achieve anything that you can't see. And so I think providing these opportunities to kids, especially from an HBCU, but also giving them the tools and sort of wherewithal to think about how this could be a career and give them some experience there is something that we take very seriously. And when Mosaic came to us with the opportunity, we thought it was great, and turned out to be a great week.
So I don't want to dig too deep into your lesson plan, but if you could give me one or two of your favorite challenges that you presented to the students that they had to problem solve.
Yeah, it was really cool. So we had so I'll give you one on the basketball side and one on the business side. So
Right.
On the basketball side, we had a group that looked at drafting, right? And so anybody who knows the Sixers, our president of basketball operations, Daryl Morey, is like super into analytics, is really like a leader in that area. And they did an analysis to look at like what is the like relative value of a draft pick. And so if you look back at like drafts over the course, I think they looked at maybe like the past 20 years or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
How much better did like a like top 10 pick or a lottery pick perform relative to somebody who was maybe picked at the end of the first round or in the second round? And what was really interesting, what they found is that there's actually not a lot of difference between like the 15th pick and like the 42nd pick or something like that. Like it's actually pretty flat. And so that's interesting because then if you're a GM and you're trying to figure out, well, what is my draft strategy going to be? Maybe I want to trade down in the draft, get some additional assets, knowing there's really not that much of a difference between pick A and pick B, which may be a little lower. So they did this whole analysis, which is really cool and presented to us, and was really insightful and thought provoking. And then the other project, there was a team that actually looked at the Buy Black program, which I just referenced. And as we have goals to serve Black-owned businesses in our market, they were looking at how many businesses are aware of the program, how do we market it, what are better ways that we could do to reach businesses where they are so that they're aware of the opportunity and we can work with them. And so that was really cool too. And they reached out to sort of their networks and surveyed a number of businesses, did an analysis of all of our marketing efforts and came up with some really insightful suggestions for how we can continue to enhance and better that program. So it was, it was a great experience for them, but I think it was also a really good experience for us getting a fresh set of eyes and sort of taking a step back and, getting some free consultant work.
Beautiful, man. I love it. I love it. Okay. So as the chief of diversity and impact, what is the most appealing or enjoyable part about being in the sports business industry to you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the best thing for me is one, like again, as a kid who grew up as a Sixers fan and grew up watching AI, and I remember that finals run that they had back when I was younger. It's just really cool to be able to work in the NBA and work for my hometown team, especially as a guy who grew up playing ball. But the other thing is, like, I think it's an incredible privilege to be able to be in the position that I'm in. It's something that I take very seriously. I think, there's a lot of good that we can do. And, my role is really around how do we take this huge brand and, this really significant business in our marketplace and channel it in a way that's again going to have a positive impact on our communities. And that's everything from the Buy Black program to how we recruit talent to other programs that we do in the community. We do a lot of grant making and things like that, and even to a big project that we're working on, which is trying to build a new arena. And when you're spending $1.5 billion, there's a lot of questions around where is that money going to go and who are the businesses who are going to be in a position to benefit. And a lot of what I work on is thinking about that and making sure that we're preparing diverse businesses from our communities to take advantage of those opportunities, and also making sure that as we develop that project, that we're doing it in the right way. And my goal is for that to be a model for what development looks like in Philly in a good way. And so it's really complicated, it's really hard, but I'm a kid who grew up in Germantown and take these things really seriously. And so it's a privilege to be able to sit where I sit and have the access to the people that I do in terms of the leaders and the ownership of the team and the company. And they're committed to it, and I sort of see as my role of making sure that we're doing the right things the right way to really fulfill our goals.
This has been heavy, man. Let's lighten up this conversation.
Sure.
We are coming upon your 3-year anniversary since this position has been created, tailored strictly for you. What has been your favorite moment as a businessman?
Yeah, I think so it's interesting. So one moment that was really cool, which isn't necessarily related to my day to day, but I was up in Boston for that first game one of the Eastern Conference semifinals this year when James went off and we kind of came back and Joel wasn't playing. So that was definitely cool. But I would say the coolest moment for me was going to actually like two moments. One was a groundbreaking, one was a ribbon cutting for a project that we invested in Sharswood, which is up in North Philly, over by the PHA headquarters. I mentioned Mosaic Development Partners. They're a development company we work very closely with, and we invested in this mixed use project they were doing. They're redeveloping some land, mixed income projects, so they're creating more affordability in that neighborhood. Historically Black neighborhood, lower income. But the other thing they were able to do is they were able to bring a grocery store to that development in a community that hadn't had a grocery store for decades, and that was essentially a food desert. So they brought a grocery store to the community, which hadn't been able to be done in decades. And they also found a young guy named Dante who was from that neighborhood, who's actually running the store. And when I think about that project and our partnership with Mosaic, that really epitomizes like everything that we're trying to do, which is again, how do we go about our day-to-day business? In this case, it was real estate development, and people don't always think about real estate development when they think about NBA teams, but it's an area that we're involved in here. But that a Black developer, Black neighborhood, development project that's benefiting that community, and use community input to figure out what needed to go in there, and creating real economic opportunity and value for the community. And so that's the kind of thing that we want to do across the board. And so being there for the groundbreaking and then going back for the ribbon cutting and seeing what that project meant to that community was really, really special.
That was awesome, man. David Gould, I appreciate you. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Anybody that's watching this interview right now, whether it be a student of the game or someone who just wants to get in there with no college background, no collegiate access, and they want to be able to be where you are sitting in this chair talking to me, what could you say to this person? What does it take?
Yeah. Good question. Damn. I would say two things. One is, you never know who's watching, right? And so like you always got to put your best foot forward. You always have to make sure you're giving your full effort. I ended up in this position actually because at my old job, we were trying to raise some money for the Sixers. We came in, we pitched them. We didn't get any money, but 2 years later, I got a call from from the COO for the Sixers, Laura Price, and she said, you know, there were some personnel changes, and you know, when we met, you just really made an impression on me, and I'd love for you to be able to come back, and if that's something you'd be interested in, you know, would you be, you know, interested in considering a job here? I had Before that moment, I had never thought about working for an NBA team. I was working for the city of Philadelphia at the time. I'd spent the rest of my career in the nonprofit sector. But because I put my best foot forward and I clearly made an impression unknowingly on Laura, that's how I ended up here today. And now I get to do all the, you know, the cool stuff that we've been talking about. So I would say you never know who's watching. Make sure you put your best foot forward. And sometimes, you know, if you do that, things will take care of themselves.
David Gould, I appreciate you, man. Where can we find you at on social media?
Yeah, for sure. If you just search David Gould on Instagram, I think it's underscore Dave Gould 22 underscore, and then on Twitter it is at D Gould underscore PHL. You can find me there.
David Gould, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate your time, brother, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Dion. Appreciate you.
100.3 Phillies R&B. We're out of here.